Hello, everybody. Welcome to the USTA Midwest section webinar titled Life After Tennis, Career Tennis Opportunities. I am Denny Schachter, your moderator today. I own Tennis Priorities in Waukesha, Wisconsin, which recruits young people to the tennis industry. Let's have our panelists introduce themselves and give us their pathway to their current positions. We'll start with Coach Frank Barnes of University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. Start it off, Coach.
Hi, thanks for having me, Denny. Yeah, I've got a pretty non-traditional route to where I am right now. I went to the University of Wisconsin at Madison, was working as an actuary, and I had a pretty solid junior background, and I decided when I was about 25 to get back into tennis. Started playing a ton as myself. Met a high school coach. He said he needed help with his program. I helped him out after work, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, skipped out of work early, just got involved with Madison West Tennis with the boys program. The next season, the girls coach needed help, so I did that as well. And the next winter, all the kids wanted some lessons over at Cherokee. So I kind of just was doing all that while I was juggling my real job. And after a while, I was like, well, I'm working 25 hours a week for fun. Something's got to give. I either got to give some of that up or quit my real job. And I quit my real job and started teaching tennis on the club level for a long time. And one of my former players that I coached was at UW Whitewater. And he said, hey, coach, I just left. My coach here at Whitewater quit and we need someone to fill in. I reluctantly did it, telling him that's not really a good option because college tennis needs people the same hours as my club job, but I did it just to get through the season, and I just absolutely loved it. Stuck with so I cut back on my club hours, made that my priority. The women's job at Whitewater opened up the following year, grabbed that, and then the camp job opened up, which is an incredible opportunity. The camps here at Whitewater are great, and the rest is history. It's kind of just one little thing after another, and now I've been here at Whitewater for 19 years.
Thank you, Frank. Brandon, how about you?
Yeah, I'd like to start by just saying thank you, Denny, for the opportunity. Appreciate having this chance to just share my story and hear from everybody else. But born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, high-level junior player, ended up getting recruited a few places, ended up at Butler University. Played tennis at Butler, had a good career there. From Butler, played on the pro circuit for a couple years. Went back to Butler for my master's degree in counseling, working with children in the inner city here in Indianapolis for a while. That then led me to getting my PhD in urban education. And I also became the coach at IUPUI, Division I college in Indianapolis for 15 years. During that process, I also ended up purchasing a tennis club in Indianapolis that I still own and operate while coaching. So I was pretty busy with that, obviously focusing on the tennis community, but also trying to create opportunities for kids that may not normally have a chance to get into that space with sponsorships and different lesson opportunities. It's been a passion of mine just to get kids that wouldn't normally have a chance to play to be able to come into that world of tennis. And then recently, about 2 years ago, I had an opportunity to kind of come back to Milwaukee. Was offered a chance to start a nonprofit organization called Strive 365, where I developed a trauma-informed youth activity curriculum and program. So we go in and work with different schools, different after-school programs and organizations where we develop social emotional programming and tie it in with different sports, such as tennis and different activities to get kids more engaged and offer them a platform for success. So while doing that, I'm still owner and operating the tennis club in Indianapolis. So staying busy there.
Thank you, Brandon. Sai, how about you? How did you get to where you're at?
Well, first and foremost, Denny, thank you for giving us an opportunity to join this great group of panelists. Unlike most of you that's on this group, I was a late bloomer in tennis. I was born in the Philippines and I moved to Chicago when I was 11. Um, I started my tennis career um, in a retail setting. I worked for a sporting goods chain called Sport Mart. For many of you who lived in the Midwest, Sport Mart was a pretty good sporting goods chain, which eventually got taken over by the Sports Authority. I was working in the retail department, but when my manager realized that I was a tennis geek and I played competitive tennis, he stuck me selling rackets and stringing the rackets for about a few years. So I worked for Sport Mart for a few years, and then going into my freshman year of college, I started working at a local pro shop where I learned a little bit more about the business. I got to meet Kevin Theos, where we would drill late at night at the McFetters Sports Center just to kind of improve my tennis. I worked at a pro shop for about 6 years, and it really gave me a different insight on the tennis industry. This is where I met a few Wilson employees, and they passed my resume along. And in 2003, I got hired by Wilson Sporting Goods, working in the customer service department, where I was the key contact for the retail partners and reps for most of the Northeast. This is where I got to meet Denny Schachter, and I've worked with Denny for a few years. And then during the 6 month into Wilson, because of my retail experience, my manager had asked me to kind of be a part of a group that worked the retail booths at the pro events. So I had an opportunity to travel, work at the LA Open, the RCA back in the day, the Cincy Open, and of course the US Open, the Wilson event. And during this time, one of the things I really learned is the connections that you make with consumers, with other reps from the different brands and the owners of these what we call e-tailers, such as Midwest, Tennis Express, Tennis Warehouse. And ultimately that led into my role as inside sales rep for a few years, as well as it made me, helped me develop the foundation to be the promotions manager. I have been in promotions since 2008. My biggest responsibility was at that time was sponsoring the 3,000 coaches that we have in the US. And as I progressed into my role, there were more additions to the program, such as the colleges where I met Erica Perkins Jasper, and then Katie Orlando. And ever since then, I've been in promotions. I've been in charge of the US market for about 3 years now, and then they added North America in 2019.
Thank you, Cy. Great. Appreciate it. Katie, you're up. Katie, you're unmute yourself.
Mute. I got it.
Okay,
Can you hear
great.
me now?
Yep.
All right. First of all, thank you for having me on this call. It's a pleasure to be out here and see everyone finally. I miss everyone. I wish we could be in person, but this is how it is right now. So I understand. But my name is Katie Orlando. I'm the director of tennis at Topaz Tennis Center. I've been here for 28 years. So how I got here was I played junior tennis. I did the whole national USTA circuit. I got a scholarship to play for the University of Akron. I played varsity tennis there for 4 years. And then one day, I think it was end of my junior year, we were playing a MAC championship match against Western Michigan, and we got rained out. So since it was a conference match, we had to move inside. So the teams played at Topaz, which I'd never heard of before. And we came down and played Western Michigan, to Akron versus Western Michigan. Of course, Akron won, just so you guys know, that day. And my parents talked to the owners when I was here, and says that she's always looking for summer jobs in tennis. And so my senior year, I worked up here at Topaz. And then from there on out, I've been here ever since. I was a staff professional, started at the bottom, became head pro. Now I'm the director of tennis, and I love what I do. I think this is one of the best careers you possibly could have. I've been in a long time, so I'm just thankful that I've had tennis in my life to get me where I am today.
Thank you, Katie. By the way, Katie's in the Akron Sports Hall of Fame, so I had to mention that. Erica, you're up. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Denny.
Thanks, Denny. Hi, everybody. My name is Erica Perkins Jasper. I'm currently the Director of Athletics, Physical Education, and Recreation at Claremont Mudd Scripps, which is a Division III athletic department and actually a consortium of 3 private liberal arts colleges: Claremont McKenna College, Harvey Mudd College, and Scripps College. And unlike the rest of the panelists who have introduced themselves, my path is a little more varied. I'm 41 years old, and per my math that I did this morning, I think I've lived in 9 states and been a member of 8 USTA sections in the last 20 years or so. But I grew up a West Coast kid in Seattle, Washington. I played college tennis at Washington State University, had wonderful intentions to study history, which I did do, and go to law school. The law school part got derailed. Actually, my junior year, I was injured and got to sit on the sidelines, and my college coach, Carrie Gross, gave me some opportunities to coach my teammates in the year that I had a medical hardship waiver, and fell in love with coaching and realized that tennis for me was a really good, I think, leadership vehicle. So when I got done playing at Washington State, I was finishing up my master's degree, and I got a Division I head coaching job at a school called Georgia Southern University, which is in rural Southeast Georgia. So if you grew up in Seattle, Washington, it's a big culture change, but packed up my bags and kind of stayed true to what would become my improv actor theory of saying yes to opportunities as they came. So spent about 6 years as a Division I college coach. And I was actually the head coach at Michigan State University. So a little shout out to the Midwest. When the realization started to hit me that I loved coaching college tennis, but I didn't see myself maybe on a tennis court coaching college tennis. I think I used to say when I was 40, and now that I'm 41, it's kind of funny to think about. I think I thought 40 was really old, but realized that I wanted to do more, felt like I probably had some skills to be an administrator. And I was actually really fortunate in that I connected with Tim and Corwin, who is helping us on this call today, and got an opportunity to go work for Timon at the USTA back when the training center was down in Boca Raton, Florida. So kind of jumped ship out of coaching, took an administrative job, spent 4 years learning from Timon and others. Also got to watch some of the best coaches, both pro coaches, developmental coaches, and college coaches in the country. But realized my place was on a college campus. And also, despite being able to chase some wonderful opportunities as I rose through kind of the coaching ranks the first time around, I never got to finish what I started. So was given the opportunity to go back into coaching in 2012, and took that opportunity and was the head coach at University of New Mexico. And we took the team from about 300 in the country my first year and last place in the Mountain West to winning the Mountain West 3 years later. For me, it was really important, I think, in that I realized, okay, I actually can coach. But it also gave me a little bit of closure in my coaching career, and knew I could really start looking for those administrative opportunities, and was given an opportunity to go work for the Intercollegiate Tennis Association in 2015. And the ITA kind of serves as the governing body for college tennis in the US. So that was kind of a dream come true, and spent how many years there? 4 years there. And in that process, you know, I was a Division I person. I'd been a Division I coach. I was, you know, a Division I player, and I should have known better from my, you know, a couple years working with Tim and Corwin, who he himself is a Division III legend, that I was destined to be on a Division III campus. But really fell in love with the Division III philosophy. Feel like a Division III student athlete really is a true student athlete. And I look today at my student athletes here at CMS, and I think the opportunity for them to really be true students is unbelievable. So kind of knew that my next step was going to be hopefully athletic administration, and hopefully at a Division III institution, and was very lucky that this position opened up about 2 years ago. And I went for it, and couldn't be happier. So for me now, tennis is still an important part of my life, but in a lot of ways it serves as kind of my vehicle to where I am right now. I love being able to work across all sports, and also I love being able to be over the recreation and physical education part, because if I reflect on my career, I see all the gifts that maybe tennis has given me, I also see that like even just a fitness routine or being able to get out and get your sweat on after a long day of class or a long day of work is an exceptionally important skill. And so be able to impact students and faculty and staff in that way is exceptionally fun for me.
Thank you. Good job, Erica. You've had that long and varied career, which kids need to hear about. The great thing I've heard so far is every one of us is networked to get where we are. We have connections, we cultivate relationships, and Kevin, we're going to hear about yours. Go ahead. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Denny. I'm Kevin Theos. I was born and raised in Chicago. I started playing tennis on the Northwest side where we lived at Gompers Park, and when I was about 12 years old. And I fell in love with tennis. I eventually was able to play in high school at Lane Tech. And then after high school, I played at Northeastern Illinois University and then later at Illinois State. During that time, I taught tennis for the Parks. After college, I taught tennis for the Frank Sachs tennis camps, as well as McFetridge Sports Center and Tennis Opportunity Program, and so other locations around Chicago. During that time, one of the pros that I worked with had been teaching for about 25 years, and he's a terrific pro. But I noticed that, you know, just all of the hours he was teaching was beginning to take an effect on him, and I began to reflect on where I was headed. I thought, well, I love teaching, but I wasn't sure. I thought, well, I might end up having some of the aches and pains that he experienced. So I decided, I'd always had an interest in law. So I decided to go back to law school. I went to Northwestern, and then after law school, I practiced for a couple of years. During that time, I met my wife, who eventually received a job opportunity in Birmingham, Alabama. And so we ended up in Birmingham. And the timing was very good because there was a nonprofit, an NJTL, that was looking for an executive director. And they had just started, they had one small program, but they were really looking to build. They had received a large grant from the USTA to get things going. I was fortunate enough to be able to become the executive director of that organization, the Birmingham Area Tennis Association, which is now Learning Excellence Through Tennis, and they provide programs for inner city kids. And I was able to build up some programs that still are going on today. And that was from, 15, 18 years ago. So that's very gratifying. For the last 15 years, I've worked for USTA Southern as a tennis service representative. And in my role, I'm able to consult with providers and a whole bunch of different, and basically every kind of venue you can imagine. So it creates a lot of variety. I enjoy that a great deal. I've also had the opportunity to become increasingly involved with the USPTA, and now I serve as the president of the Southern Division. A couple years ago, we started a mentoring program in the Southern Division that became a national program, the Career and Leader Mentoring Program. And we've had about 400 pros be a part of that, and it's been very gratifying to just kind of shape that program and get more and more pros connected with each other and help their skills.
Great job, Kevin. Okay, well, thank you all for those great intros, and for the audience out there, hopefully you've digested the amount of time and effort people have put in to get where they are and the networking they did. Very, very good. Here's our first question, and we'll go in reverse order. Kevin, you're going to start. And let's limit it to a couple minutes each. What do you see for the future of tennis, both playing and for the industry? It's obviously a wide open question, but I'm sure you've got some answers. Go ahead, Kev.
Sure, Denny. Well, I look at it actually in terms of racket sports initially. So I think there's no question that people love to play racket sports in general, whether it's tennis or pickleball, padel, pop tennis, you name it. People just love getting out there and hitting a ball around with an implement. Having said that, tennis has a stronger infrastructure than any of the other racket sports. And so I think that bodes very, very well for tennis. I think that we're in an important time right now because we have, and I guess I would attest to this, that we have increasing sales of balls, particularly low compression balls during COVID. And so there are a lot of people who were not playing tennis before who are hitting the courts. And so it's a really important time that we capture these individuals and get them to become frequent or core players. And my hope is that we'll be successful in doing that. I think that, there are a couple of it's good that our industry has become better over the last couple of years in various partners working together, whether it's the USPTA, USTA, PTR, all the manufacturers. But I think it's also important to remember that there are very different interests. And so, in terms of like USTA, I think the ultimate would be to have more individual players and more play occasions. But that's not the same as, say, selling more rackets, that type of thing. I mean, although we want that, there's an overlap, but they're not identical interests. But my hope is that we'll be able to, again, to capture the players that we have now that have started to play, and that we'll keep them in the sport on a long-term basis. I think we can do it if we're focused.
Great. Erica, your thoughts? Couple of minutes.
All right. So I think before the pandemic hit, there's a lot of times where I was really concerned about the sport of tennis. And I think there's been some positives that I've seen over the last 6 months. Is we've seen a lot of folks maybe who were very casual players, or maybe, fairly competitive players, get a little bit back to the basics, whether it's hitting on the garage door with my 6-year-old son, or trekking down to the park and having some fun that way. That gives me a lot of hope, because to me, that was kind of how I got hooked playing tennis. I got hooked playing tennis, playing with my dad, going down to the tennis club and challenging, the 12-year-old boys when I was the best 8-year-old girl and having them handed to me, but also, trying to take on my mom, who I couldn't beat till I was 9 or 10, all those different things. So I have a lot of hope. Obviously, I am a college tennis person by experience and now trade. I have a lot of hope for college tennis. I do think the one thing that we continue to miss maybe in tennis is putting the emphasis on teams, especially for young kids. And so trying to bring some of that magic throughout the pathway and keep that a goal for our young players coming up. There's more college tennis opportunities than actually junior tennis players out there. So there's amazing opportunities for lots and lots of people. And so hopefully putting some emphasis there, because I do think team tennis brings fun into it. And I do actually think the college tennis experience, and I think we heard this from all these panelists, it really does prepare you for the next step in your life. If you think about a dual match, even you start out with doubles, you've got to work competitively with a partner, really in partnership to achieve a goal, but you're working for a larger entity and you're representing something larger yourself. And then you got to go out in singles, and it's almost like a big project that your boss assigns you. You got to take care of your court, but you're always working towards the good of the organization. So right. I would love to see more emphasis on college tennis and team tennis, but I'm a little more optimistic, oddly, than I was 6 months ago.
Very good. That's a great comment. Thank you, Erica. Katie, you're in a club. What's your thoughts?
Well, right now, I think the industry after this pandemic, or actually during this pandemic, is looking very promising. I think one thing I know about tennis pros and tennis clubs and tennis owners, we're pretty resilient. We've gotten through a lot of ups and downs, and this has been a down, but the industry is looking on our end, at least in Akron, Ohio, people are coming back to the game. People are trying the game for the first time, and a lot of families are playing together, which has been a very good positive thing at our facility. And I'm hearing that from other people across the section as well as the nation. So I do think we had an opportunity, as long as we can keep these people engaged, put them in some kind of, they have to have somewhere to go and play. As long as the pandemic gets under control and the clubs can stay open, we can get this going. I think we're in a really good situation right now. I do have one fear about the industry, and just being as a tennis pro, I've been on court for over 30 years. I feel like I'm a young one still in the industry, even though I'm not that young, but we don't have a lot of youngsters coming up in the industry right now. I do think that we need more people playing college tennis. And what scares me is the college tennis teams that are dropping and not getting a chance for kids to play tennis opportunities. Because just for example, University of Akron, their women's tennis team during the COVID time. So we're going to be 4 years here without a women's team. And that gives clubs no chance of hiring people that want to teach tennis. Right. So most of my staff has come from a college team, have played somewhere. So I think if college tennis starts to go downward where teams are getting canceled, it's going to be harder to find good tennis pros, because if our industry is booming like it is right now, we need people coming into this industry as a career to teach the people that are coming in right now, because I'm not going to be around for another 20 years.
Right.
I'll tell you that right now.
Sure.
I'm going to get off the court soon. So I need youngsters to come into this industry and take on what we have done before and make it a career, because it's a really good career to have. So I think the industry is good, but college tennis right to me is a little shaky just because teams are dropping left and right.
Right. Thank you. Sai, your comments?
Well, it kind of goes along the same as what Erica and Katie and Kevin had hit on. Um, the future, it's funny, this pandemic has definitely gave us a little bit of a aha moment where it's not quite the 1970s, but the interest in tennis is definitely there. From a manufacturer's point of view, racket sales are up in the middle of a pandemic. And when we were shut down during March through June, unless you had access to a private court or a public facility, where are these people playing? Erica hit it on the head. She started hitting against the garage. Parents are buying a lot of 10 and under equipment, easy nets. Where are they playing? In their backyard or their driveway. So the urge or the interest is there. I think Katie hit it on the head where the next step would be there's a lot of coaching opportunities. One thing that is to have an interest in tennis, but making sure that these tennis interests are taught the right way. Coaches should be kind of investing into that. And then from the USTA, this is a growth opportunity for participation and membership. I think from an industry person with many different hats, I'm kind of the cog to the spoke, so to speak, where my role is to help grow the sport and not only being a brand representative, but I think if we all work together, there's an opportunity to grow coaching, from several PTM programs out there, such as Ferris, Methodist, and I know the USTA has opened more opportunities for education in that. I think that's vital to the future of our sport. Certification for me is important. You may be able to hit a good ball, but from an employer and sponsorship point of view, it brings a coach to a better light when they know that you are affiliated with the ITA, with the USPTA, the PTR, or any other teaching organization, because at the end of the day, if a parent trusts you with their child to grow them and teach them the right way, why don't certification gives you credibility, and it also brings about experience.
Great. Thank you. Brandon, your thoughts?
Yeah, for me, I look at things kind of twofold, from the perspective of a club owner, where I've also taught, and then from the perspective of a college coach. And I see, from the pandemic happening, it created an opportunity at the club where people, when you take something away from people, they realize, man, I took that for granted. More people want to play, more people are embracing, like, man, I have a chance to be with my family, play tennis, and still follow guidelines without having to necessarily worry about getting sick or getting somebody else sick because of the lack of contact. So you see the need, and you see people that may not have been playing the sport or haven't played for a while trying to get into the sport, which is great. But then on the other side, on the coaching side, for the last, not even with just COVID, more teams are being cut. But even prior to that, you look at a lot of the mid-major programs that have been cut over the last decade. Every year, those numbers increase. So there's fear because I think that they intertwine with each other, right? As Katie talked about and Erica about, if you're playing the sport, you're looking for, okay, when I'm done with college, or even as a junior, I want to go to college and play. And you get to college and you're like, what are things I can do after college to get into the sport? Maybe you want to coach. Maybe you want to coach and teach. Generally, it happens where college coaches also run summer camps or teach lessons on the side. So, if we're cutting programs and cutting teams, that's less opportunities for everyone. And then, even rackets, equipment, sales will go down. So we have to, there's a formula I like to follow, and it's visibility plus accessibility equals opportunity.
Great.
So I think, you know, creating opportunities for kids to see the sport, get them engaged, get them involved is great, but then also giving them access to learn, build relationships, and grow from it will create opportunities for in every silo that's attached to the sport itself. So that's really what I think is the key to continuing to grow the sport and getting more people engaged and empowered to learn from the sport itself.
Great. Thank you, Brandon. One of the things I've noticed for all of us, we've all taught tennis, no matter what level of our occupation is today. And so I think that teaching tennis gives you the ingredients that you can take everywhere: personal relationships, budgeting time, all those ingredients that make for success. Coach Barnes, your thoughts? Mute, you need to unmute. Frank, got to unmute.
All right, sorry. Yeah, most of it was covered except a couple of things. You know, obviously, tennis is built-in social distancing, so obviously created some opportunities. One thing I noticed at the clubs around here is the pros and the owners had to become creative. They had to think of new ways of offering things so that they were allowed to continue. And anytime that happens in life, you find some better ways of doing things that might end up being something permanent. You know, pickleball is being added to a lot of the clubs around here now. UTR tournament opportunities are out there, team tournaments, which create more fun, that makes a kid or an adult really want to return the next week to do the same thing. So I think if everyone is grabbing onto what's working that they might not have thought of for a while and running with it, it's going to, I think the pandemic could bring some well-received changes for the long run.
Thank you. Okay. What suggestions do you have for our listeners as they prepare for a job in the industry? Frank, we're going to start with you. If you were going to give a tip or two to a kid out there that's listening in that wants to enter the industry, what tip would you give them?
Diversify your skills. You should get into high school coaching, college coaching, work at a club, and work at all levels, from tiny tots to the advanced, to the old men, to the women's tennis player. You've got to see everything. Learn how to run a pro shop, and definitely know how to string a racket. You can't be a tennis player if you don't know how to string your own gear. And volunteering is the best way to get a glimpse into each of these. And if you volunteer for a day or a week, you will find good connections. And one thing I learned from Denny and his Rolodex is create connections wherever you go. And if you're good and energetic, you volunteer for one day, 1 week, a month, or just tell a college coach, hey, eventually I want to be a college coach. Can I just come and fill up your waters, get the scorecards out for you, being around college tennis, because it's hard to get into college tennis. Everyone wants to be in college tennis. Do the high school first. So if you diversify, not only are you going to get experiences across the whole industry that you can use, but you would be shocked and astonished and very pleased at how many connections you're going to deal with. And get to college coaching, or not college coaching conventions, high school coaching conventions and industry conventions, and those connections will build quickly.
Thank you. Brandon, your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I would say be willing and embrace the process, right? Have an understanding of delayed gratification. Don't skip steps. Be willing to go through struggles, communicate, learn from other people, because all that's in preparation on what's to come. I think that if you don't skip steps, it'll put you on a platform for success. As we mentioned, there's some kind of connection. Like everything that I've personally done has always come back to those 6 to 8 hour days in 95-degree heat, and humidity, and just learning how to be disciplined in your approach, learning how to deal with adversity. I think nowadays, youth specifically, they want things quick and easy. You know, technology is great, but it's also created this opportunity for them to have access to things a lot quicker. And you ask a kid to go outside and play for a while in 90-degree heat, they look at you crazy. They're like, no, I'll be in the basement playing video games, you know? So we have to teach them that going through that process is a great learning experience and prepares you for opportunities later down the road. And delayed gratification is something that I think we need to embed in their minds, that, you know, you want to get to this point where you have to take these steps to get there, and it takes time to get to that point.
Very good. Thank you. Cy?
I like what Coach Barnes and Brandon had said. My advice is to invest in yourself. If you want to be a teaching pro, get certified. If you want to be a racket technician, get certified. Invest in time. Like Brandon said, it's a process. Find a mentor that would help guide you through the place. It's not a quick thing. The tennis industry is multifaceted. There's a lot of things to learn. Like Coach Barnes said, make a connection. Build your network like Denny Schachter. It's important because the tennis industry might be vast, but in reality, the community is tight and it's very small. If you need to go forward, you need to make the right connection. Whether it's being sponsored by a brand or working for the ITA, working for the USTA, the USPTA, there's a lot of bridges that you need to build in order to establish yourself in the industry. And again, it all comes down to what you want to do, what you're passionate about. And it takes some time, some devotion, and you got to understand that you need to invest in yourself in order to be successful in this industry.
Thank you. Katie? Katie, you're up.
I'm up. The biggest thing I would say is don't go to a job interview and tell a potential employer that you're just doing this until you find your real job. Being a teaching pro is a real job. You got to go in there like a business person. You need to act like you're a salesperson. If you know how to sell, you can teach tennis. You don't have to be the best competitive player to be a great teaching pro. I've seen both sides. I've hired great players that turned out to be disaster teaching pros. I've hired the high school coach who just learned 3.035 tennis, who's been a phenomenal teaching coach. So what Coach Barnes says also is diversifying. I agree with that. My mentor at the club here, I have a great mentor named Dallas Allman, who first told me when I first joined the club is we're a tennis club without walls, which means you go outside the club in the community and you volunteer. Well, I took that a little bit too far, I think, sometimes, because I'm volunteering now, dish level USTA, Midwest level USTA, USTA national, USTA, plus I got to do my full-time job. But it's very important to get yourself out there and network and make relationships. We're all on this call, know somebody. We all know Denny, but we all know somebody else on this call that has helped us through this industry, which we stick together. It's a tight industry, like Cy was saying, and we help each other out. And I got to say, if you just become a salesperson, you're doing a business. It's a business. Tennis is a business. It's not just a teaching pro. So don't think of yourself as just as a teaching pro. Think of yourself as a business person, and you'll get through the industry just fine.
Okay. Thank you, Katie. Erica?
Okay. So for me, I think the reminder first that if you love tennis, like tennis can be the career, or for maybe someone like me, tennis ended up being the vehicle to where I am now in my career, where tennis is still an important part, but it helped drive the boat. I think a reminder for everybody on the call, tennis is a small world, like Katie said, and that kind of leads to maybe my 1 through 3 points, which one, your reputation in tennis begins in the 12s. And if you're 18, don't panic. You can still repair it if you had a nasty run in the 12s. But I think remembering that, compete your hardest and compete fairly. And number 3, write thank you notes. And the reason those are my 3 is, even now at 41 years old and as an athletic director, within the last 3 months, I've run into people through my work that either saw me play when I was 12 years old and remembered some small fact about it. Somebody who ran a tournament and I wrote a thank you note for running the tournament when I was in the 14s, and I was the only person who wrote a thank you note. And a lot of opportunities I got in when I was early in coaching came from how I played and competed as a college tennis player. So I was known for maybe not being the most talented player, but always having pretty good sportsmanship most of the time, a really good attitude, and I fought really hard, and it opened a lot of doors for me.
Thank you. Great comments, Erica. Kev?
Yes, Denny. So the first thing, and the other panelists brought this up, I think finding a mentor is very, very important. If it's somebody at your club, just someone who can advise you to how you can become better at whatever it is that you're doing right now. So that's the first thing. Second one is to think longer term. There's a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, or former CEO, who suggested that one way to look at it is that maybe your first job out of college, you're able to spend 10% of your time doing something that you really love and the rest of it not as much. But then as you accept further job, you take another job, maybe you're spending 20% of your time on things that you love. And then the next job, 30 or 40%. And over time, you eventually end up doing something where you're spending the bulk of your time doing what you enjoy most. So just kind of thinking long-term is important. Volunteer, that's been brought up already, and that ties in with networking. Becoming certified, going to educational conferences, meeting a lot of other people. It's very, very important. In my USPTA and USTA roles, I will get calls from tennis directors who are looking to hire someone. They'll ask me if I know anyone who's looking for a job, or they'll ask me, hey, do you know this person? And the networking really helps. On the flip side of that, I will get calls from pros who've been kind of doing their own thing, never networked, never really just connected with other folks, and now they're looking for positions. And it's harder. It just makes it a lot easier if you're out there meeting people and developing those relationships over time, particularly through volunteering. The final idea is that your reputation matters, and following through on what you say you're going to do is very important. If you do follow through, then people will remember that, and you'll have more opportunities in the future. If you don't follow through, very few people are going to directly say anything to you about it, but that at some point you may, and I've seen this multiple times where people get stuck, and the talk is that, well, I mean, they just can't be relied upon to do what they say they're going to do. So I think just as a kind of personal way of operating, developing that reputation that you follow through with your commitments is vital.
Thank you, Kev. Great job, guys. I have one little tip I'm going to interject that Frank kind of alluded to. He alluded to my Rolodex, and I'm probably I know I'm the oldest person on the call, and business cards may be a passe thing, but for influencers that are making decisions on people getting hired, they're in their 50s and 60s, and many of them want to have a business card. And I suggest to college kids when I speak to them is to get your business card printed up with your name, your email, and your phone number. And you never know who you're going to run into. Somebody that can better your career. And you hand them a business card, that's important. But also ask for the person you've run into for their business card. And you'll never know in a 4-year college career how many business cards you have from parents of opposing players, parents of teammates, people that can help you to the next step that you're going to take when you graduate from college. I could go on and on about that, but some kids take me to heart on it. Some kids ignore it. But I think having a business card as a college kid is a really important thing for the next step in your life. Last question is, as Erica pointed out to me in a response, this is a loaded question, but I think it has practical advice because we've all made mistakes along the way. And that is, if you're going to change one thing in your road to today, what would that be? Kevin, if you were going to change one thing that you took that you wished you hadn't, what would that be?
Well, I think, trying to figure out things too much on my own. I mean, I had initially mentioned having a mentor. I think often and early on, I spent too much time. Well, should I make this decision or that decision? What direction should I go? And I think having someone who had already been down that path and really seeking out those individuals would have made the decisions a lot, easier, more efficient. So I would have definitely sought out some advice early on.
Very good. Okay. Erica.
So despite my email, I will say that I really wouldn't change any stops on my career path. You know, even as I reflect on, say, some of the first jobs that I took, I might not advise someone who is 23 to pack up and move to rural Southeast Georgia and to try to coach a Division I tennis team when you've never coached and you just finished playing. We can go through all the things that were scary about that, but you know, I think about all challenges in kind of my professional life, and I think it's made me better and more experienced. And I think as a lot of us in leadership positions during the pandemic have learned, a variety of experiences is exceptionally helpful, particularly during crisis. But I will share, and I don't know who to attribute this to, but it's a well-known saying that says like comparison is the thief of joy. And I know when I was starting out, sometimes it would be exceptionally challenging because college tennis, particularly, you know, late 90s, early 2000s, when I got into it, didn't pay very much. And a lot of times it still doesn't. And it was hard for me to go, okay, I decided not to go to law school. And now my friends are graduated from law school and they're making X, and whew, I can barely rub two pennies together. And I think you have to step away from that and realize that you're on your own path. And there's a lot of things with working in sports where maybe it's not monetary compensation, and it's actually the joy of working in a sport and teaching life lessons that you get from that.
Thank you. Katie, how about you? Any mistakes?
Of course not, Denny, right? No. Of course, there's always been a lot of mistakes, but I think the biggest thing for me that I've learned is not to overcommit. And because I think what Kevin was saying that time where it's like, it's very important reputation wise, is that you make sure that if you say you're going to do something, you get it done in a timely manner. I've always tried to do that. And as I've gotten older and when you start doing that, guess what? People ask you to do more stuff.
Right.
Or they give you volunteer of the year, or they give you the volunteer of the year award, and you can't step it back because you feel bad that you got an award. So you keep on going forward. So sometimes just don't overcommit and don't be afraid to say no. Say, hey, I'm overcommitted right now. I'll get back to you. I'll help out when I can. But just don't overcommit, because there's everyone knows a list of pros that we can name that said all the stuff that they're going to do and has never completed one step of it. And that's very frustrating. So I just say, just make sure you just do what you can and then just move on to the next task. Don't overcommit yourself. And
Right.
take care of your knees. If you're going to do as much tennis as I do, take care of your knees.
Okay. Sai, how about you?
I think it kind of ties into what Erica and Kevin and Katie had hit on so far. Preparedness for me. We're in this job where we get hit on with many different tasks and challenges on a daily basis. One thing that I probably needed to start earlier was to develop a rapport with a mentor that would kind of advise me to, hey, go in there with your passion, but go in there fully head on, but be prepared. Don't be lackadaisical and make sure you under promise and then over deliver. Because at the end of the day, like Kevin said, we are judged in this industry by how do we come through. It's not talking the talk, but it's making sure that you're delivering in what you promise and what you're trying to achieve.
B, how about you?
Yeah, for me, first and foremost, I definitely should have stretched more back in the day, because like you said, Katie, I mean, my left knee gives me troubles all the time now. But I think really it's more about if I could kind of go back when I was 20, the 40-year-old me to the 20-year-old me, I would have said mindset, right? Because you just look, I'm thinking back and I'm like, man, I used to think about, man, why is this happening to me? When you have to face adversity, you know, and I've always been a resilient person, but now the question I'm like, I should have been asking myself is, why is this happening for me? Right? Instead of to me, for me. So yeah, it's a challenge. It may not be the way you wanted it to go, but you're learning from it, you're developing, you're building character, you're building resiliency. And 20 years from now, you're going to be glad that you went down this path and had the opportunity to have to deal with that adversity, because it's going to make you into the person you'll become.
Thank you. Coach? Frankie, you're up.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Erica. I've always been the kind of person that never wants to say I would have changed anything in my life, because then I would have missed who knows what great experience I would have missed if I changed anything. But because you're Denny, I'll give you an answer. I would have played college tennis. Okay, I had the opportunity. I grew up in Minneapolis, had a chance to play for a good D3 program in the Twin Cities, or come and be a Badger and go to a D1 school, big school, have that experience. And after seeing what my players get to do at the D3 level and all the life lessons they learn, everything they get to experience, and to compete like that with a team, I think I missed out there. But if I hadn't become a Badger, I wouldn't have met my wife. So I better change my answer back to the original.
Got it. One of my good buddies, Mike Hurley, sent me a text just now, and he said, when one door shuts, another one opens. And that's a very, very good tip. The other thing I think that is important for young people to understand is that you have to take risks once in a while. You can't stay in that cocoon forever of staying the same. And sometimes risk has reward, sometimes it has failure, but you got to take the risk. Erica talking about going from the state of Washington to a different culture in Georgia, she took a risk. And probably that whole trip, she was very, very scared about what the prospects were. But when it was all done and she added up all the things she learned in that job in Southern and Georgia, she could take those experiences to the next level. We've got a few minutes left. I've gotten there's been no chats. We haven't had any questions come through. If any of you have anything else that you think you missed along the way on the previous questions that you would like to add, that remember that much of our audience today are young people. They've certainly got some challenges ahead if they want to enter the tennis industry, but I think we've all conveyed how rewarding it's been for us as we move through our lives. If you've got anything you want to add that you think is pertinent that we may have missed, or a question that I missed that you would like to ask the others on the panel, we can certainly do that. If not, we'll, oh yes, Erica, go ahead.
Well, I'll piggyback on what you said, Denny, because I think you touched on it. But in a couple of my previous positions, I was fortunate in that we were hiring a lot of young people who wanted to work in the tennis industry. And one of the challenges I found with college tennis student athletes coming out was an unwillingness to move for a job, which if you want to get into the tennis industry, there are lots of jobs, but you can't always choose the location. And so that's one thing where I think sometimes some young people have missed some opportunities. And then I think there's a focus on maybe what your ending salary should be and some, you know, and just having an understanding that working in sports a lot of times is a labor of love, and you can actually create a career out of it, but your starting job and starting salary probably not going to be that big, and that's okay. But one of the things that is cool about being in tennis is sometimes you can take a job in tennis and it may not even be teaching. It could be coaching a college team. It could be working for Wilson. It could be working at the ITA or the USTA. You have the ability always to teach a little bit on the side and make some money that way too. And so remembering you always have that in your toolbox is important.
Right. One thing Frank pointed out, that his biggest regret is that he didn't get to play college tennis. I'm kind of in the same boat. I didn't get to play college tennis. I made the freshman team at Wisconsin, was never good enough, and I ended up coaching for 9 years and having a very nice career as a college tennis coach. sometimes you think you have to be something to be something else. And the reality is you really don't. If you're a solid person, if you return all phone calls and emails, if you say thank you, like Erica said, if you remember the people that helped you along the way, it always comes back to benefit you, and it's always in your back pocket. So good points. Anything else? Anybody else have any other last tip to convey? If that's the case, if that's not the case, we'll listen. And then if not, we'll let you get on to the rest of your day. Does anybody have anything else to add? Seeing that no one else has anything to add, I want to thank all of you for taking the time out and being part of this webinar. A hearty thanks to Tara Moore of the section office and a reminder, which is being posted right now, that our next webinar is November 12th, discussing multi-sport athletes and the college tennis player. I would also like to thank the USTA Midwest staff members, Greg Boyd, as I mentioned, Tara, and Chad Doctor for their assistance. And I also wish to thank our collegiate committee from the USTA Midwest, Timon Corwin, Liz Bondi, Lisa Fink, Jeff Detman, Todd Wojciechowski, and Gary DeCastro for their input on this webinar. And we'll close with everybody stay healthy. A hearty thank you once again to all of you. Have a great, safe day. And no offense, but on Wisconsin.